Hi Dominic, how you doing, man? You okay?
Yeah, really good, thanks. Yeah, good.
No,
Coffee.
good, good, good. Now, I think one of the obviously the big thing you've got coming up is Kairos now, in a couple of weeks' time, or by the time this comes out, it'll be a couple of days. But before that, obviously, I wanted to talk about your sort of like background in the sport because you really are kind of not way way back, obviously, but you are kind of one of the OGs of the UK grappling and MMA circuit, really. That kind of like early 2010s, 2015 kind of like time. So can I ask, because I know you originally started out competing in MMA, was that your like primary goal from the beginning, and was jiu-jitsu kind of like a little side quest kind of thing?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, initially when I started MMA, I kind of had a big thing about being a grappler, but not a jiu-jitsu guy. Like I didn't train BJJ. I did like bits of sambo, bits of Japanese jiu-jitsu, like anything I could get that wasn't like mainstream BJJ. And then eventually, I think I'd already had about six semi-pro, as it was called back then, fights. Um, I started actually BJJ, and yeah, kind of just fell in love with it, and yeah, from there.
So it's funny because that is something that I think anyone that has ever watched you compete before will kind of pick up on, is that your style is obviously really unorthodox and kind of more from watching is kind of more catch wrestling based, like the way you roll and the way you sort of like your preferred positions. Is that like a conscious thing you've had since the beginning then, or is that just something that sort of naturally happens for you?
I mean, a lot of because again, kind of the mental outlook I had of being like a grappler but not a jiu-jitsu guy, and being in MMA, a lot of the people I kind of idolized and watched a lot at the beginning were obviously Sakuraba um, and Josh Barnett, who are both like prominent catch wrestlers. So I think, I mean, I didn't really know what catch wrestling was at the start, but I think I did kind of veer towards that. And like I get a bit of a grappling nerd, and I feel there's a lot of crossover with early like old school judo in the UK and catch wrestlers, like being the two kind of main grappling styles that are around. And there was like a lot of crossover with challenge matches and things. And a lot of my early training partners, again, grapplers who weren't BJJ guys, were tended to be like near Waza judo guys. So I wonder if there's a little bit of kind of catch wrestling input in that kind of way early on.
So it's interesting you mentioned Josh Barnett as well, because I spoke to him not so long ago, and he had a similar kind of sort of like story coming into how he found grappling, which was he was watching a lot of the UFC 1, UFC 2 wrestlers that had that catch wrestling style without actually knowing what he was doing. He was just kind of emulating them and then ended up being a catch wrestler. Was it the same kind of thing for you then?
I think yeah, a lot of that. And yeah, I remember. I think when I was a purple belt, various like more senior BJJ guys and stuff would come up and they go like, oh, you look really like catch wrestlery and stuff. And that was kind of the first time I started hearing the term quite a bit. And obviously, I love the Kimura or double wrist lock, which I think obviously slots right into that kind of style.
And then obviously you actually won Catch Wrestling Worlds as well. I think it was back 2018, maybe. Um,
It was.
what was that experience like then, actually competing under a rule set that kind of suits you a little bit more?
I mean, it was amazing to be honest. It was really cool. It was a bit surreal, kind of because it was quite a breakout tournament because I fought and beat Victor Henry, who was a black belt under Josh Barnett in the final. Who I think he's still in the UFC now. I think he certainly had a few fights in there now. But yeah, so that was like a big win for me. And Josh was in his corner and stuff, so that felt like a surreal moment. After I won, of like turned around to John Hathaway, who was cornering me, like, did that just happen? Um, and then it got more surreal as well because actually it's like the after party thing, which started right after. Josh Barnett ended up pulling me onto the dance floor and spinning me. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna like wake up now. Must be like some type of surreal dream. I've hit my head or something.
And then obviously you've done quite a few different like formats as well. Like you're, if you don't mind me saying, kind of the most well-traveled, one of the most well-traveled people in the UK, like with the different styles you've done. I mean, I saw you did a Luta Livre event not so long ago as well. How was that? Like the different format there?
That was really fun. That was really fun. They had a rule which I really liked, which was if the timer goes while there's an active submission attempt, the match doesn't stop, which I really like that. My daughter actually came with me to that as well. She ended up getting silver in the boys division because there weren't any girls. Um, but yeah, no, that was a really nice experience. I want to do that one again actually, because yeah, I did really enjoy that. And again, you get like a mix of slightly different grapplers as well.
So you touched on that as well, like training with your daughter and stuff. Is she like small child or teenager kind of thing?
She's about to turn 13. Yeah, so she's almost as tall as me now, which isn't saying a lot, but you know.
So can I ask as well, what's that kind of experience like, being able to train with your children and bring them up into the sport, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's really amazing, and it's kind of changed a lot of how and why I compete in jiu-jitsu, because obviously it's, yeah, I look through it through a bit of a different lens now. But yeah, my eldest is like super competitive. Like yeah, she loves competing. I think she's we worked out the other day, she's 16 and 4 this year so far. She's just like a maniac. But yeah, but when I compete like with her, I started, especially at first when she'd like end up going to tournaments and getting smashed before she started winning. I used to go into a very like, not quite as MMA mode, but I used to get like work myself up. I'd be quite like I was known for being kind of, most of my teammates like stepped back when I was like getting ready to compete because I wasn't in a social mood. And I think at first I won a naga with her, and I started kind of doing that, and I think she came up behind me and tickled my ribs, and I like bristled a bit, and I was like, well, to be honest, I might win or lose these. It's not worth her like kind of not enjoying the experience and being like, oh, my dad gets a bit weird at tournaments. So actually, and I still won. So I was like, oh well, maybe I don't need to like get into like a serial killer mindset.
That's a nice thing to learn as well, I think, because obviously, like you said, for a little kid, that kind of aggressive like mindset can be a bit off-putting or intimidating kind of thing. But would you say you've kind of learned to adapt to that over the last couple of years then?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's kind of, it's probably to do with aging as well. But when I was like younger, it's one of those ones where you like it's life or death every kind of competition. A thumb wrestling match, you're like gonna die on that hill. And now as I've gone through, I've kind of got to that point where I often say it is like, my jiu-jitsu is either good enough to win this match or it's not, and don't really care. Like, I've got to, it's like I'm pretty good at jiu-jitsu. The rest will probably take care of itself. I don't need to like try and get into like some kind of frenzied state.
That's a good point as well. I think that's something that I know Lachlan Giles has mentioned before, where I think he said something along the lines of like he's never lost a match that couldn't have been won through better technique. It's never a case of, oh, I was a million times better than the guy, I did everything right, but he was just more aggressive than me. Well,
Yeah.
realistically, you've probably made a mistake then. If that's been the deciding factor, you probably could have done something better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think yeah, I think originally it was a lot of me just carrying over old MMA attitudes into it because obviously it's a lot more the consequences to your health and stuff are just you're getting into a different place. And I think for a while I carried that into grappling. But yeah, like you say, I don't think it really has a massive effect on the outcome.
And then you mentioned obviously the MMA career that you had, and you left that side of the sport fairly early. You know what I mean? You didn't sort of like hang around for too long. Can I ask, was there any like intentional decision there, or was it just kind of like aged out of it a little bit, or?
Yeah, pretty much. And my body just broke up. So it's like, I think, yeah, it was a period of probably over 9 or 10 years that I fought. And in that time, I think I had 40 fights and quite a few injuries. And I think my last one, I was on one of the last shows of Bama. I think the one before it folded. And I ended up getting hospitalized off a flying knee and things. And it was just like one of those things where I didn't intend to stop fighting, but I was just like, oh, well, I'll take a little break. And then suddenly it was like 2 years. I still hadn't taken a fight and it just gone. There was last few years, I kind of, because we have guys that fight still. And obviously, like John teaches guys to fight and has them active. So I spar with them sometimes. So I'd been toying with like, oh, have I got one more in me? And then it starts coming all these caveats. It's like, well, I'm not going to make a realistic like running Cage Warriors or anything anymore. So it'd be like a bucket list one, and I wouldn't want someone who's like in the early 20s to like raring to like build a career. And then I start finding, well, I'm putting all these asterisks. It's like, I don't think I'm actually at the point I can do that anymore. I think someone offered me a fight on a show, and it was like, he's a former, he's like, he'd had 2 losses in Bellator, and it's like former Cage Warrior. He'd stopped Sam Creasy, I think, for a Cage Warriors title. I was like, oh, that's not really the kind of guy I fight. And I was like, well, if I'm not going to fight that kind of guy, I just shouldn't fight anymore.
So that's interesting as well. Do you still get that kind of like call back to MMA every now and then, like feeling like you might want to jump back in?
Definitely, definitely. And especially it's like, I'm helping guys like prep. And that one of the things like, because I definitely, I feel I must have some CTE. I'd be shocked if I didn't. And when I start, like, I think I did some rounds with one of the fighters a little while ago before is like fight, and it was like quite good. I mean, I kind of managed, basically because I was scared of getting hit. I was just like dragging him down to the mat every time, and I probably took, I don't know, 7 or 8 good shots in the whole like 5 rounds. I still had killer headaches the rest of the day. I was just like, yeah, I couldn't take a camp. But there's those moments, one of the guys will, I get a win or something. I was like, oh yeah, no, I can hang with him in sparring. And I remember, okay, but he's like in his first 3 amateur fights, like I wouldn't go back to like a beginner amateur level. I'll end up getting some guy who's so got Nurmagomedov at the end of the day.
Yeah. And then obviously you still active in jiu-jitsu pretty frequently as well. So do you find, or Luta Livre as well? So do you find that kind of helps sort of like satisfy that urge as well, like getting a sort of different combat sport outlook?
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, it definitely like still scratches that desire to compete and test myself. But again, it's like in grappling comps, I often look at it as a little bit of a like laboratory. Like I'm often, I'll bring in something I'm trying to see if it's worth time spending on developing or something like that. Or I particularly have a thing of trying to, whatever theme when I'm teaching in the gym that month, I try and work that in the match. So yeah, it's a little bit more playful for me.
So I've got to ask then, does that mentality still extend to events like Kairos where there's actually a decent amount of money on the line, or will you sort of focus on more on what you do best then?
Um, I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting because for me, this tournament is a little bit different because I have been like starting to do more masters and things like that. And obviously, this with the prize money is and stuff, it's drawing in a lot of very serious, still like in that younger. Like I think one of the guys is like a 17-year-old purple belt in it. I mean, that's very much young enough to be my child. And it's quite interesting because I feel like it's more than like the wave after me. It's like the wave after the wave after me in that. So I'm finding it quite interesting to see kind of where I stack in the current news blood kind of level of 66.
Nice. Yeah, and I think if you don't mind me saying, you are someone that's going to be very difficult to prepare for because, as you touched on, obviously you've got that unorthodox style, and it's something that obviously with Kairos, you're going to have 4 matches guaranteed. Obviously, it's a round robin
Yeah.
tournament, so there's not too much individual preparation you can do. But I think for most people competing, you kind of train against the sort of standard jiu-jitsu style
Mm,
every single day. So it's no surprise, even if someone's better at one particular aspect or they have a slightly unusual like way of
mm.
passing or something like that, it's still fairly similar to what you've seen. Whereas you're kind of completely off the scale in that sense.
Yeah, yeah. No, I often tell people like because I'll train with like some guys who are really good who come in and they'll be a bit like disheartened. I was like, well, it's just like you have to get used to me. It's like you'll end up like uh there's guys, are always who I don't get any of my weird shit on because they're just so used to me. And then you'll get guys who are better than them come in and they fall for the traps because they just don't know yet. So it's like yeah, I'm a kind of unique flavor. I'm a little hard to suss out in the. I mean, they're 10-minute matches, I think, aren't they? So
Yeah.
yeah, it will be interesting to see because that is normally something that works in my favor. Like I love catching people with things and they'll afterwards they're like, what was that?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that as well, that kind of ability to get used to someone, and then if you're not used to them, obviously you might technically be like a level above them or something, but still struggle. And I think that's something that played out when you did the Polaris Grand Prix, where Ross Nichols was one of the favorites coming into it. He's like, at that time period as well, he was considered pretty much the best guy in the UK, along with Freddie, who he
Yeah.
met in the final. But you gave him one of the tougher matches because he kind of couldn't really cope with what you were doing. Obviously, you got used to it as the match went on, but like to begin
Yeah.
with it, you got really close to getting what you wanted out of it. Like I think you were going for rolling Kimuras and stuff, weren't you, over his
Yeah.
guard,
Yeah.
which is kind
Yeah.
of, it's not unheard of, but it's something that people don't try that often. And where he plays a lot of seated guard, that kind of really played into your advantage,
Mm.
what you were doing. So yeah, I think that's a kind of good example of where being unorthodox can actually make you do a lot better against people that maybe were like the favorite coming into it, like I said.
Yeah, no, I definitely think, yeah, that can be true. Like, it's almost like there's sometimes a blueprint, a competitive jujitsu, and people play their part, and yeah, yeah. Then I kind of tend to try and throw a spanner in the work and do something just really weird.
And then it's funny you mentioned obviously doing something weird because you're kind of after you're like a Polaris fan favorite anyway, I think, but you really kind of like hit a newer level when you broke out that reverse bulldog choke. Can I ask where did that come from as well? Because you're the first person I ever saw doing it at the time, for sure.
It's there's a great story actually, which I'll have to mention his name, Amos Kashi, who's this um genetic anomaly. He's 60 now, and he still like rips, like terrifies people's legs. But basically during lockdown, he and I kind of we had our like training bubble in the garage, and he's like, I mean, he's square basically. He's got like no neck. He's just absolutely like a block, and he does what he calls dead man guard, where basically he lies on his back and just avoids you getting any isolations on limbs, and then tries to like throw you into a heel hook. Um, and I think I'd started getting a bit of luck with the Josh Barnett like scarf hold neck crank. And then he was hiding his arm, so I couldn't get his arm either, and I just had his head. And then I started basically trying. I was like, I'm just going to try and squeeze this and see what happens. And I ended up tapping him, and then we kind of, because we were like training together so much, we kept refining it, and he'd give me certain problems. I'd try and deal with them, and that's where I worked out eventually what became the reverse bulldog choke, which yeah, I think it's still one of my favorite subs. And but particularly that year after I hit on Polaris, I think that I got 6 matches by submission that year, and 5 of them were reverse bulldogs.
So when you sort of like fine-tuned it and tweaked it and that sort of thing, is that like an ongoing process for you with anything that you kind of discover or like stumble into?
Yeah, generally. So it's like I'll normally take it through gradients, because you'll get some people, I tend not to generally roll too much with like many white belts, or certainly not new white belts. More so, not kind of insult because of their ability, but sometimes they'll tap to things that aren't really a thing. And because of my game, like that can be risk. I don't want to waste my time like pursuing something. So I tend to mostly roll with like uh I but new blue belts, or just before guys get blue belt and up. Because that way if I get them with something, they know enough to kind of tap to it if it's meaningful. And then I'll take it from there and see how far it works. Because there's been plenty of things that I've started out thinking I've got something new, and then it like cuts out at about the purple belt level, and it doesn't work any better. But the reverse bulldog choke works all the way up, and obviously I think I've exclusively hit it on black belts in competition. Um, but yeah, to be honest, I actually kind of regret the name reverse bulldog, because the more I've done it, I feel it's closer in mechanics to a north south choke. But yeah, it's done. It's done.
I know, but it's one of those things as well. You might regret not naming it after yourself as well.
Well, yeah, John Hathaway was saying I should have called it a Dom Dog, which, to be honest, sounded way too cringy at the time. Down 10th Planet London, it was kind of colloquially referred to that anyway. But yeah, I've kind of just pushed reverse Bulldog as that. As long as I get the credit on Google, I don't care.
Fair enough, fair enough. And then I know recently you brought out another instructional BJJ Fanatics, and you called it, was it the Guide to Ungentlemanly Ground Fighting? So
Yeah.
can I ask what your kind of like overall view is of that, like that phrase, if you know what I mean? Like how do you sort of approach it ungentlemanly?
Basically it's I try and make positions as uncomfortable as possible. I think again, in a sense, that's kind of quite a catch wrestling thing. Like I think they always used to say, was it Jiu-Jitsu is the gentle art and catch wrestling is the brutal art. And a lot of it revolves around just making people unpleasant. Like whenever I train with catch wrestlers and stuff, they'd always use phrases like, oh, you give them a bit of bone, like you're getting something bony, grinding it into something soft. So, and sometimes in jiu-jitsu, I mean, a lot of it's not gentle, but there's a tendency to like, I think it's less now, but like to act in a way that it's like, oh yeah, very, very clean, very gentle. Whereas I kind of like the things where it's quite unpleasant. Like always I was attracted like I nick things off the old judo guys where they'd like roll up their knuckles underneath your back in a hold down and things like that. So it's just those kind of things that um are unpleasant. Like one of my favorite Kimura grips, which whenever I teach at a seminar, I always pick someone and make them scream because I'll get the Kimura grip and then they're locking up and I just take the tip of the elbow, slide it through a little bit, and you just grind it into the ribs there, and it like automatically makes them pull away and like and it so it's just like kind of unpleasant little things. You're in turtle, you start leaning across the back of the calf, pulling up the toes, just like, it's not necessarily a submission itself, but it like breaks people down and makes them give you things that otherwise they'd probably be less inclined to do.
So do you think that works in your favor over like a longer time period then, where you're able to do things like that sort of over 10, maybe 15 minutes rather than like a, like a 5 minute match kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. These days, I mean, again, coming from MMA initially, I used to hate long matches because obviously when I'm coming into jiu-jitsu, I was quite a good wrestler from MMA, certainly by jiu-jitsu standards. So I'd get the two, and then it's like, oh dear God. So I'd basically want the matches to be as short as possible. White belt was perfect, take people down, score by two, and then stall out for three. Now I'm complete opposite. Pretty much longer the time limit, no time limit would be great because especially as people get a little bit more frustrated or tired, they tend to fall my traps a little bit more. So even if at first they're super cagey, because it kind of has had this effect where, because I'm known as like being a bit unorthodox and attacking people from less common positions, some people, when they're initially engaging with me, are super like high alert and not wanting to go almost anywhere. And they'll keep running out of everything. But then as the match progresses and they get a little bit more kind of, a bit tired, a bit more aggressive, they tend to fall for my traps a little bit more. So yeah, 10 minutes I feel for me is kind of ideal minimum these days. Like yeah, I'd like longer really.
Do you, or have you done many submission only matches then, or is it generally just that 10, 15 minute kind of mark?
To be honest, yeah, mostly 10, 15 minute. I mean, I have a very like for my wins, I have a very high submission rate. So it's quite rare for a match that I win to go to points. Like I think in the last couple of years, I've probably only had 2 or 3 matches go to points that I've won. So normally I'll finish in that, but I haven't had too many like with a high time limit. There was one a few years ago that I was meant to do with Sam Gibbs, which was going to be a 60-minute match, which I was really excited for. But he ended up, it was like a combat jiu-jitsu match, and he ended up hurting his hand. So it ended up not coming to. But I was quite intrigued by that just because obviously you approach that kind of thing differently, and your opponent does as well. Because even if I'm going into a match thinking, well, I need to get a submission, your opponent might not be thinking the same thing if it's a 10 minute match. They're like guiding, okay, well, if I pass now and blah, 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 like, it's, people game any rule, right? But if you've got like, well, the only way we're getting out of here is by submission, it changes how you play.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think you're hitting the nail on the head there when you say as well that everyone will gain any advantage they can. I mean,
Mm.
it's human nature, and this I
Yeah.
think it's kind of what makes you a good competitor as well. If you're not
Yeah.
looking for every single way you can win as sort of maximize your chances, then you're not really trying to win. You know what I mean?
100%, 100%. I did Grappling Industries in Paris in the summer, and they're 5 minute matches, obviously, which is a bit tight for me. But I got a couple of subs, but I thought I think in the thing and in the like round robin and then in the final stage, I fought this black belt from the area. It was like a Brazilian, and he was so good at any time I'd initiate anything. He was like on the edge. He'd be going out of bounds. I think to be honest, I think one of the times I ended up still suplexing him out of bounds because I was just like fed up with. So, I mean, but I thought it was almost admirable how well he was like. It was like when he'd do things, would be in the middle. When I'd initiate anything, he'd be on the edge, and it'd be like, "Yeah, stop." Um, but yeah, I mean, it's the game. I can't really bitch about it because it's how it goes. Um, and as I said, it was so consistent. It was actually almost a thing of beauty, like because it just every time I was like, yeah, it was,
No, that is like I said, I think if you're not using every single advantage that you possibly can, then you're leaving sort of ground uncovered. And that's again, when I spoke to Josh Barnett before, we were talking about him sort of like devising the catch wrestling rule set. He made a good point, which was basically you kind of have to go into creating a rule set with that in mind, knowing that, well, where are my advantages? Where am I like sort of letting people get an advantage? And if that's not the thing you want to see, then it doesn't make sense. Do you know what I
mm,
mean? Like in catch wrestling, as an example, you want to see wrestling, you want to see people take
mm,
each other down. So it's like, well, we obviously can't let people pull guard. We obviously have
yeah,
to penalize people being taken down. It has to be, incentivizing that route. And I think in jiu-jitsu, to sort of like link back to when you talk about it being more of a sort of gentle art, I think that's something that comes a lot from incentivizing guard play as well. Because I think generally when you're in guard and you're looking to sweep someone, most of the time it's fairly kind of nice looking, or like flowing, or sort of like taken one way, taken the other way, and it looks nice, but it isn't necessarily mean or like grindy. Whereas a lot of that comes from wrestling up, or from
yeah.
taking a bad position like turtle or side control and forcing your way to top or to stand in from there, which in a lot of jiu-jitsu rule sets, or the IBJJF at least, that's kind of really not incentivized. There's no reason for you to do it almost. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. It's yeah, it it builds that image um that goes forward with it. But I think there's more people now who kind of play a more like grindy game. I mean, obviously, Wagner Rocha can make anywhere unpleasant, muffling you from bottom or whatever. What was that new like thing you're doing, the Kit Dale? Like I've been trying that, obviously, but yeah. Again, it hasn't quite the submission ratio. It's not body lock passing very well, but
So
yeah.
is there anywhere else other than say like Wagner Rocha, like active competitors at the moment that you look to when you sort of try and take those kind of inspirations from?
I mean, to be honest, I mean, this might be again because of my time, but I think I'm quite nostalgic, so I tend to like watching a lot of older school guys. Any older school guys who are still competing, I'm quite like. Again, even though his style isn't necessarily, I mean, I've certainly taken some, inspiration from Butterfly Garden stuff, but like I love the fact Marcelo's back competing. Like that's amazing for me. But yeah, I definitely when I'm like watching jiu-jitsu, like I'll watch I'll watch the UFC jiu-jitsu ones and obviously Polaris's and things. But if I'm like free time wanting to watch specific matches, I find myself looking up guys that, were like the guy when I was uh, sort of competing early on and stuff and looking up to. I often find myself still just watching Sakuraba, either grappling breakdowns or MMA fights and stuff, just because it's yeah, that's still nostalgia is a strong thing.
No, you're right. And I mean, I think as well for Sakuraba specifically, he was quite a few years ahead of his time, really. So, even though the game's obviously advanced a lot since then, I still think for that sort of time period of like 90s, early 2000s, he was way ahead of a lot of people that were around at the time. So he's still kind of somewhat relevant even today, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, I like watching his fight with Henzo quite a bit. I've watched that quite a few times. And again, Henzo is someone I really like watching as well. And I also feel that he was like, especially for that era, kind of, he was quite an aggressive jiu-jitsu fighter by a lot of them they were kind of just like Hoyler's fights and stuff. He was trying to draw them into his guard and things like that, where Enzo was very much going like after people. And I think he had quite an aggressive style, which again, as like pure jiu-jitsu guys go, that's more the style I tend to enjoy watching and trying to emulate, really.
Nice, nice. And then if we look to the next event, like I said, it's Kairos that you've got coming up now. We've already mentioned there's quite a decent amount of money on the line. You know, there's two and a half thousand, I think it is.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's pretty decent payday for jiu-jitsu, and
very.
you've got some really good guys in the bracket as well. But is there anyone in particular you sort of keen to compete against there?
I mean, pretty much. There's the two I think technically would be the toughest challenges. I mean, obviously the young kid poses a load of problems and stuff, but from the point of view of having quite a seasoned, well-rounded game, I think you've got Daniel DeGroot and Tommy Yip, which are the ones announced. I feel like they've got they've got the miles and they've got very accomplished games and careers already. So either of them would be very interesting. I'm again not because of the coin flip thing with gi or no gi. I'm not sure what I'd actually prefer because I used to be very heavily no gi, but these days I train a lot in the gi. I teach a lot in the gi. So I really there's certain things I like doing in both, and there's certain positions like in no gi, I'll be like, oh god, I wish we had a gi on now, and then the vice versa in the gi. Um, yeah, it's kind of interesting. I'm not completely sure what I want in that sense either. I'm quite. I think I feel I'll be fairly happy gi or no gi, but I definitely. I think the ultimate would be if I get to have a match gi or no, and no gi with each of them. But yeah, we'll have to see. But yeah, it's something that plays in my mind a lot.
To be fair, that's probably well, that is the most unique part about Kairos is the coin flip of either having a gi or a no gi match. And I think, realistically, it's gonna sort of be different for each person that you face. You know, some people
Mm,
you're probably gonna be better in the gi than them. Other people it'll be no gi. So it's kind of really throws a spanner in the works. I think like we've seen that with the first couple of events that they've done, that people that were sort of predicted to do really well have struggled in certain matches because
mm.
this kind of had the odds stacked against them, but it is literally a coin flip. So you can't really complain, you know?
No, exactly, exactly. No, and I think again from the idea of how like gaming it and stuff, that makes it much harder to do that kind of thing because you've got to kind of off the cuff pull out, a game against a different, you because if I'm preparing for someone like Tommy or something, gi or no gi, it's a different, it poses different problems each time. There's going to be some commonality, but and let alone with that going like I think it's like what 15 minutes beforehand you find out or 10 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
It's you kind of almost just got to go, which yeah, it makes it quite exciting. There's something in it that is slightly reminiscent of like the kind of I don't know pride Japanese shows, like some kind of like sort of weird gimmick that just makes it a little bit unpredictable and chaotic.
Nice. That's pretty much everything we've got time for at the moment. But is there anything else that you want to say, or anyone you want to give a shout out to, or anything you've got coming out soon? Or
Yeah, just I'll plug the Goblin Grappling and Gentlemanly Ground Fighting Instructional Fanatics. I think it's on sale at the minute with the Halloween Halloween sale, and obviously Scramble. But yeah, no, other than that, thanks for having me.
no worries at all, Dom. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to me, and take it easy, and good luck at Kairos as well.
Cheers.